The disappearance of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, two Dutch college graduates, have long fascinated the public. In 2014, after their graduation, the two went on a backpacking trip. When they arrived in Panama, they stayed with a host family in Unrequited. While there, they went hiking up the Pianista Trail, one that was relatively challenging, but not too difficult for young, healthy people such as themselves. They shouldn't have had any problems on that hike as long as they stayed on the trail going to the summit and back. Unfortunately, the girls never made it back. After an extensive search, authorities were only able to locate some of their belongings and parts of their bodies. And this was months after the girls had disappeared. Because of this, their cause of death could not be determined. The official explanation of the authorities was accidental death. Most people believe that the girls had gone off the trail and gotten lost. They were inexperienced and didn't know what to do. Phone records show that there were multiple attempts to call the Dutch emergency number. Unfortunately, no calls could be completed due to a lack of reception. It was also reported that both phones were turned on and off between calls. It was presumed that they were trying to conserve battery. Over time, the two women might have gotten wounded and then died due to exposure, thirst, hunger, or even attacks by animals. Though this was the official conclusion of law enforcement, many believe that the cause of the girls' disappearance and eventual death were far more sinister. In this video, we'll take a look at the wildest theories on Reddit about Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon's disappearance and any evidence that may support them. Wild theory number 1. Unrequited love. Among the many conspiracy theories about the girls' disappearance, one of the craziest we came across on Reddit was unrequited love. Some have posited that one of the girls, Kris to be specific, was in love with the other, Lisanne. Unfortunately, her love was not reciprocated. This rejection made Kris angry enough that she pushed Lisanne off a cliff. According to the theory, they had argued about this, which caused them to get lost in the jungle. At some point, Kris got so angry that she purposely pushed Lisanne to her death. Afterwards, it's possible that she couldn't live with herself, and so she just wandered around until she finally died of exhaustion, hunger, and thirst. Falling off a cliff can explain why there was difficulty in finding the girls' human remains. The water currents at the bottom of the cliffs in the area are particularly strong, but there's no evidence that the girls fell off of a cliff. More importantly, there's nothing that even remotely suggests Kris ever had any feelings for Lisanne beyond friendship. In addition, some believe that it was Kris that died first because the pin was either entered wrong or never entered entirely whenever her phone was turned on after April 4th. Let's move on to the next wild theory. Wild theory number 2. Indigenous cannibal tribe. According to Unrequited locals, the girls were eaten by an indigenous cannibal tribe that lived in the jungle. The cannibal natives are known as the Rabbit Indians or Indios Conejo. Sounds far-fetched, right? But what if it's true? Several Reddit users have heard the same story from people in Panama, and if we look at the evidence, it's somewhat possible. The fact that Lisanne's backpack was found in very good condition could indicate that someone had taken them and kept them somewhere before leaving the girls' belongings along the banks of a river. Authorities also found 30 different fingerprints on the backpack, which were unaccounted for. Moreover, inside the backpack, the authorities found Lisanne's camera, both of the girls' phones, and some cash. Not only were these items not stolen, but they were also in near-perfect condition. How would this be possible if someone had not kept these items secured somewhere safe? And why would the murderers not be interested in the camera, cash, and 2 phones? It would be in their best interest to ensure these items never see the light of day. But for natives who live in the jungle, material things like these may not be useful enough to keep. That's not all. The night photos in the camera may not have been made by the girls. Some theorize that the photos seem to have been taken by someone who didn't know how to use a camera. Maybe someone who was playing around with it. If the girls were taken by cannibal natives, it's possible that one or more persons in the tribe was curious about their stuff and played around with the camera. This can also explain why there were so many fingerprints on the backpack. The remains found could also be used to support this theory. First, there weren't any teeth scratches or other indicative markings that point towards the remains being eaten by animals. If the bones were dragged by the natural current of the river, then scratches would also be present, but there were none. Second, none of the big bones were found, including the skulls. According to experts, there are no animals in that wilderness that would eat a skull. So, where are they? Third, Kris's bones were bleached. According to some experts, this type of bleaching is not natural or accidental. The type of bleaching on the bones could only be intentional. Decomposition of the bodies would take a minimum of 3 weeks to occur under normal conditions. However, the cooler elevation and rainfall in the area would have prolonged this process. In addition, bleaching requires the bones to be exposed to ample direct sunlight. However, based on rainfall data of the area, there weren't many sunny days during that time. Moreover, sunlight does not bleach bones evenly. There should be gradients of discoloration or shadows on the bone. With Kris's pelvic bones, the bleaching is uniform. And then there's the presence of phosphorus on her bones. An analysis made by the Chiriqui Institute of Legal Medicine and Forensic Sciences, IMELCF, suggests that lime was probably used in the deconstruction of her body. But there were no traces of phosphates in the soil samples collected from the area. This discovery implies that the presence of this chemical on Kris's bones was not natural. In fact, we can confidently assume that someone or multiple someones used chemicals to bleach her bones. Another interesting point is that Kris's pelvic bones were broken in 2 places. Bones don't generally break easily, even if they were washed away by a strong current. The pelvic bone in particular is typically strong and don't break easily, especially in young people. So what could have caused them to break? We don't know, but it's probably not a natural cause. And it's not just Kris's and Lisanne's bones that were found. The forensic investigators also found bones of 3 other people. According to an IMELCF spokesperson, these bones were likely from a washed-out indigenous cemetery. But it boggles the mind that a native tribe who is very familiar with the flooding that occurs at the river every year would build a cemetery near it. Moreover, Kris's bones had no flesh attached, while Lisanne's still had some. This meant that there are inconsistencies between the rate of decay of the girls' bodies. More importantly, it takes more than 2 months for bodies to have decomposed into skeletons. So why was one a skeleton and the other still had flesh on it? Could it be that Kris was eaten first and Lisanne was killed later? Of course, every piece of evidence we use to support this theory can also be used to serve as proof that the 2 girls were murdered, but not eaten. There's really no evidence that such a tribe exists in that area. Then again, maybe it's because no one who has ever encountered them have survived. Weirdest theory number 3. Organ traffickers. According to one Reddit user, the host family tipped off the local organ harvesters about the 2 girls for money. Once they were on the trail, they were abducted by the traffickers and kept in a house for several days before they were killed. Why weren't they killed right away? Well, presumably it takes a while to prepare someone for surgery. It's possible that the girls were able to get access to their phones, but because the signal was blocked where they were held, they couldn't send out an SOS to the authorities. We can use some of the same arguments we made to support the cannibal tribe theory, such as the fingerprints on the backpack, the bones, and the rate of decomposition. But the photos in the camera doesn't quite fit this theory. And we also need to ask, why were these girls specifically picked by organ harvesters? Considering there were many expats living in the area, we can't assume that it was because they were European, as some conspiracy theorists suggest. And if these were experienced organ harvesters, wouldn't they have a better way of disposing of the bodies of their victims? Moreover, they would likely be more careful in making sure that the girls' possessions won't be discovered. The cash, for example, would have probably gone into someone's pocket. The phones and the camera could have been wiped clean and sold. Based on all these questions, we'd say this theory, as weird as it is a bust. So, weird theories aside, what did happen to Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon? We delve deep into the most likely scenarios in one of our videos. Be sure to check it out. If you love our content and want to support the channel, feel free to check our web shop where you can find exclusive true crime merch brought to you by Bad Things.